Okay, Teacher's Voice. Tell us your name and why are you out here today?
My name is Barbara Mataloni. I'm from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I'm a teacher educator. I'm out here today to defend public education and the public good from increasing corporatization of not only the American Educational Research Institute, but of our public schools and of our public commons.
And Barbara, you earlier, you had some work that you've been talking about how the corporatization is involved with evaluation. Can you tell us what your personal experience of that is, or your professional experience?
So as a teacher educator, I've been subject to the imposition of the Pearson-Stanford EDTPA, which is a standardized assessment of teacher education. It's a high-stakes assessment that will be used to determine whether or not somebody is credentialed. It's now operative in at least 20 states at various levels. My students and I, last spring, when we heard that this was coming, and we heard that the students' work was going to be sent to Pearson in order to be scored by a person who had been calibrated and determined their credentialing, the students refused to participate in a field test of that assessment. We worked really hard to even get permission to refuse. When we finally did refuse, we got an article in the New York Times about it. 67 of 68 students opted out, and 17 days after the publication of the article, I received a letter of non-renewal, lost my job.
Tell me about the complicity that you see of the research organizations in seeding evaluation to this as such.
The complicity is there at a variety of levels. I would say that the first place it is that they accept the language and terms of the corporate so-called reformers. I call them corporate deformers, and the venture philanthropists who are involved in this. And that is, they accept the language of the market, they accept the language of accountability and standardization and quantification that really is contrary completely to the deeply human experience that is what happens in classrooms across the country every day. So that the human element of education is a human activity, it's a social activity, and that is now being reduced to these very narrow ideas of what's possible in education, and it's being reduced to a number. To the degree that our research associations have done two things. One is participate in that by having representatives from Pearson and McGraw-Hill sit on panels and give sessions, take money from Pearson in order to support them. All of those things are sort of very concrete ways that they're participating in the corporatization. I would add that another thing is that teaching and learning are political acts. In a democracy, we have public education as a public good so that we can learn to participate actively in our communities. There's no way that we can ever do anything relative to education that is not political. AERA refuses to acknowledge the degree to which education is political and take stands that we really have to take right now if we want to defend education as a public good.
Do you see, lastly, that by making this gesture to invite Duncan here, that they are giving the perception or the reality that they support his reform agenda?
I think that certainly they give the perception, and they'd like to pretend that that's a that's not a fair assessment of what's happened. I think that what's really important to understand is that Arne Duncan through his Race to the Top, Obama's Race to the Top initiatives, through people like Bill Gates, Stanford Children, Michelle Rhee, the Broad Foundation, the Walton Foundation, they dominate our discourse about education in the media in a profound way. So the idea of having Arne Duncan come and speak to us, when he speaks to me every day and the policies that I have to implement, and I never get to speak back to those policies, is deeply problematic. If Arne Duncan had been invited to come and go to some sessions and sit and listen and not speak, that would have been something powerful, I think. But his voice already dominates. We have to fight to get our voice heard.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll let you have your voice back to get over here.
I have to do a session. I'm not going to be able to talk.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. the talk.
And want to go inside and protest the dog.
You should get ready to go ahead and do that.
You should get ready to go ahead and do that.
And look for saved seats in the front row.
And look for safe seats in the front row.
We want to maintain a presence outside.
We want to maintain a presence outside.
So some of you should stay and continue the chants and the protest.
So some of you should stay and continue the chant and the protest.
For those of you who are going inside,
For those of you who are going inside,
we have these handy signs.
we have these handy signs.
And the ones you made that are beautiful.
And the ones you made that are beautiful.
When Arne is saying something that you disagree with,
When Arne is saying that we disagree
which
with,
will be most of the time if he's not lying,
which will be most of the time, if not,
hold these up.
hold these up.
Let everybody know how we feel.
Let everybody know how we feel.
When somebody says something we agree with,
When somebody says something we agree with,
and we do have people who will be asking questions,
and we do have people who will ask questions,
give them a really good cheer.
give them a really good cheer.
How are the people?
Power to people.
Can you tell us what this is, sir?
What?
Tell us what it is.
Oh, what it is a roadmap of power, how Race to the Top got there through a group of investment bankers. And on the back is all the money that they're making out of Race to the Top, selling services.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You want people to think, you want to challenge ideas, and some of us want to challenge speakers. We're not always going to agree. The trick really is how we disagree. Now, in my dealings with Secretary Duncan's staff, they've consistently pointed out that he recognizes that change is bound to be controversial and welcomes discussion and disagreement. So I want us to get moving. Let me tell you how this is going to work, I hope. Secretary Duncan will offer an overview for about 20 minutes on student assessment. I have then asked Pedro Noguera of New York University, Eva Baker of UCLA, and then my newfound friend from last night at the end of my talk, Arne Dodge from LIU Post, to offer the first 3 questions. After that, we'll open it up to the rest of us, but we got to end in an hour. So and please do try to keep these aisles open, and I'm not saying it for any other reason other than that we're in San Francisco and we could have a fire or earthquake. So without further ado, Secretary Duncan.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak before this group. I look forward to having a great conversation when I'm done. I'm going to talk to some length today about some of the current controversies around standardized testing and the purposes of assessment. But I want to preface those remarks by saying how much I value compelling educational research. The truth is that educators and policymakers today still have a large unmet need for relevant research. Education researchers can and do play an absolutely invaluable role in formulating policy from preschool all the way through grad school. You are the experts. You are the independent truth tellers. Yet the role of the independent expert is not at odds with asking hard questions about the practical implications of your work and assisting practitioners to improve educational outcomes. Rigor is necessary, but not sufficient. Relevance matters as well. In my 7+ years as CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, and in my 4 years in this job, I've often had the occasion to ask basic questions about program effectiveness, to which unfortunately there are few compelling answers. Today, for example, federal, state, and local governments spend several billions of dollars each year on professional development for teachers. Yet we know surprisingly little about the effectiveness or the return on investment of professional development.
Return on
Teachers
investment.
deserve so much better than that. Why do we continue to spend so much every single year with no clear sense of efficacy? Samuel Johnson famously said that to count is modern practice, and the ancient method was to guess. Sadly, school leaders and educators too often still have to guess when they make education policy. To make education research more relevant, I would ask you to consider two challenges. The first is to do a more complete job of asking comparative questions in research and evaluation. Even in cases where methodologies are imperfect and the evidence is complex, policymakers need the help of researchers to deal with real-world challenges, like designing a new and better generation of assessments, or figuring out what works in expanding high-quality preschool programs. We need you, the researchers, to ask the question, which approach works better, this one or that one? And then we need to move forward, informed by your thoughtfulness. We need you to assess how reforms compare to the status quo, and we can't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. And my second challenge would be to remain open to findings that contradict or compel a rethinking of conventional wisdom. There's a long history of robust skepticism in program evaluation and social innovation, so much so that it has even been codified in informal laws of evaluation. We've all heard about the law of unintended consequences. Researchers are also familiar with Campbell's law, which is often cited in debates over standardized testing and accountability. It holds that the more any quantitative social indicators used for social decision making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, and the more apt it will be to distort and corrupt the social processes that it intends to monitor. And I'll talk about Campbell's law with regard to testing and accountability in a moment. But let me point out the unintended consequences of social policy are often welcome in the field of education. Perhaps the biggest social program and expansion of educational opportunity in higher education in the 20th century was the GI Bill, which President FDR signed into law in 1944. None of the GI Bill's authors actually foresaw that the education and training provided in the GI Bill would fundamentally transform not only the lives of the greatest generation, but community after community.
The thing where I really got the truth was when I went beyond the principal, went into the teacher's room, asked the families and said, what's going on here? Because the people I speak to tell me that this is a high-stakes testing regime that is suffocating them. It is marginalizing everything. And despite the rhetoric that comes from your office, if you look downstream where it's truly happening, it is destroying the joy, the spontaneity, and the innovation that we prized for all the years that we did good things with kids. And until you recognize that, so my question is actually a follow-up to Eva Baker's question, and my question is simply, until we get it right, you yourself decried high-stakes testing, you cited Campbell, all of the pressures. Until we get it right, let's declare a moratorium and not have this kind of happening. And if you can't do that, and if you won't recommend